Moments with Marianne. I am so delighted to be introducing Natasha Owens, and she's here today to talk to us not only about her album, We Will Rise, but the work she's doing with the hurricane relief. So welcome to the show, Natasha.
Thanks for having me.
You know, it is such a pleasure to have you. When I heard about all the good work you're doing, not just with your amazing album, but what you're doing, you know, just to give back, I had to have you on the show.
Oh, well, I appreciate it.
Well, and for our listeners that might be new to your story, and we'll get into all the great stuff you're doing here in just a minute, but for people that are new to who you are and what you're all about, why don't you share your story with us?
Sure. Well, about 7 years ago, back in May of 2010, my dad was cleaning his guns. He was sitting at the table. He was just dealing with a very dangerous gun, a Glock. And he was the epitome of gun safety, though. And he must have missed a step somewhere. There was a bullet in the chamber, and it went off and hit him in the heart.
Wow.
And so 60 seconds as I knew it, life was gone for me. I felt like it was. And once the shock wore off, then I tried to be strong for the family, tried to be strong for my family, my kids, and just didn't know how to live life without him, trying to figure that out. And right around the year mark, the shock had worn off, the reality had set in, and I down-spiraled into a depression very quickly. I made a mistake by questioning God by asking why. And when I didn't get an answer, then I down-spiraled, because that's such a dangerous question to ask, is why? Because we won't get an answer.
I think a lot of times, because we never really know, and I think a lot of people in that situation would be asking the same thing. So people can really relate to your story and what you're going through.
Right. As humans, we try to figure it out so that we can rationalize and put everything in our boxes and get closure. And I felt like I needed closure because I didn't get that. And I didn't get an answer. Now I know that the two questions you do ask instead of why is, what do I need to learn and who do I need to help? But don't ever ask why, because especially in a circumstance like that. So I down-spiraled into anger because of the things that I spoke. It's a battlefield of the mind when you go through something that's pretty faith-shaking. And when you speak things, especially negativity, that begins to start working on your mind of what you think, and then that's what your reality is, how you look at things. If you spew out negativity, you're going to view negativity. And I down-spiraled into a depression. And 6 months into my depression, my pastor called and said, we need a new music minister, and you've always been over the praise team. I feel like you need to step up and be that music minister. And I laughed at him. I said, let me get this straight. I'm in the middle of a depression, which you know. I can't get out of bed every day, and you want me to motivate people and tell them how great God is when I don't feel like He's great right now. And he said, well, just think about it, and I'll call you back. Well, he kept calling, and the third or fourth time he called, he said, I don't want you to say anything. I just want you to listen. And he said, I know you feel like you're completely dead inside and you have nothing to give. And I said, that's correct, because I would give that to my kids. And he said, I feel like that God always gives an out. He wants you to come out of this situation, and He's throwing you a lifeline. And I just feel like this is your last lifeline. And little did he know, I was already walking down a suicidal thought road, to where I think if he hadn't crossed my path that day and said exactly what he said to me on the phone, I don't think I'd be here. He happened to say the right thing, and he said, I know you're tired of your circumstance, but this is the way I look at it. I believe this is what God wants you to do, and I believe that it's the way that you're going to get your healing. So if you'll just step out by faith and take it, the moment that you step on that platform and start ministering to people, God is going to give you that, and He's going to heal you in return. And I happened to just needed healing that day, and I said, okay, I'll do it. And I was to the point where I couldn't pray or open up my Bible, and I was honest with him on that. And I said, is that the type of music minister that you want? He said, that's the type that God wants because he's calling me right now. So I couldn't.
That's a pretty powerful message.
It is, and I couldn't see his hand in it at the time,
Yeah, well, and for a pastor to say that, because the thought would be that typically they'd want somebody who's really immersed in all of that, and that's part of what's going on. But he really got maybe he was divinely inspired. Maybe he was your angel for the day, obviously, but. It sounds like he really was put in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and for a pastor to say that kind of penetrated through my head too, because that's not the norm, especially for a leadership position on the platform. But he knew that it was a process that I would have to go through, and that I would get stronger, and I would get more healing, and I would get to the place where I could open up my Bible and pray. But if I didn't start the ball rolling, I would not get there. And he knew that. And so he allowed me to take that position. And the first week, I'm concentrating on the songs, trying to pick songs for the week. And I think everything I did over those few years was nothing but restoration songs. And just, more deep meaning worship songs. And as they played, as I was listening to them, suddenly in 2-3 minutes, I'm out of bed and I'm getting ready. And so I use that as a tool to help me get out of bed every day, that music, until I could get stronger on my own because on my own I wasn't getting out of bed.
Yeah.
So it was a process. It took me years to dig out of that hole, and it was a daily battlefield of my mind that I had to conquer. And there were several things that I did. I wrote scriptures down based on whatever emotion I was dealing with that day, and I put them in my pocket. And when I would start to feel like I was down spiraling or feel any kind of negativity, I would pull them out and start reading them. And then the panic attack almost would stop. Okay, I can do this. And then the next 5 minutes, I'm doing it again. But I was training my mind to pour in positive. So it took a while to dig out of that hole, but I didn't get further away from him from that point on. It was like
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just curious. Like you talk about putting positive in your mind. Did someone mention that to you? Was it just instinctively you knew that's what you needed to do? How did you get to that point?
Well, the music penetrated immediately. I didn't realize that music would give me that much strength to get out of bed. And so in worship songs, you always find scripture in worship songs. And I just had that thought one day. I'd used those songs for so long, and I had that thought, you know what? That right there, that song that I just listened to that helped me get out of bed, that was a scripture. I bet so I just had this idea to just Google the emotion that I was dealing with that day, which was most of the time fear. It was fear that I was dealing with.
Yeah.
And I would just say scriptures for fear, and then they would come up and I would write them down. So it whether that was God giving it to me or just me putting the pieces together, that's what was in the songs. But those two things were such a strong foundation of me getting out of depression. It's really those two things that really speared it.
I think a lot of people listen to your story that have maybe gone through a similar situation or have had great tragedy or great loss, and they're looking for that way out, and you're kind of this beacon of light helping them see that, hey, you don't have to be stuck there. There's a positive, there's the light at the end of the tunnel for you, and a rainbow at the end here for you. It doesn't have to be so hard.
Yeah, I know some people just want direction, and now I have whenever I do concerts, I have on my merch table, and anyone listening can get them through a place called armedwithtruth.com. And there's scriptures that they're temporary tattoo scriptures that you put on. I put them right on my forearm because that when I look down, that's what I see. And I would write them in marker or pen on my arm at one point. But now I just put these temporary tattoos on, and they have packs for like fear and anxiety and whatever emotion that you're dealing with, and you can buy that pack, and they're good on your arm for about a week. And that's really helped me. I still do that.
Kind of, a nice reminder there.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times people won't go. I'm talking to them after a concert, and I'm telling them this is what you need to do. A lot of times they won't take the time to even Google or write down the scriptures and put them in their pocket. That's just too much work sometimes when you're in the midst of depression. So that's why I started carrying these at my merch table. I could just hand them to them. Here, this is what, you need to put this on your arm. And I did some of my favorite scriptures, that I give away a lot of times. But that's a good tool that's easy to do. It's something that you can have delivered to your house, and you can immediately start using them. So I'm in the middle of this battle, trying to dig myself out, trying to be a music minister, which I really wasn't qualified for at the time, and trying to deal with people trying to give me advice. I really didn't deal with my grief after the year mark. People would say, "You having a bad day?" "Yeah, I'm dealing with grief." "You're still dealing with grief?" "Well, yeah, I just really started, and it's something that I feel that I'm going to deal with to some degree for the rest of my life." People want to say stuff to help, but they sometimes say the wrong thing. And so
there's no time limit either on how long a person grieves. Everyone's different. And some people take a heck of a lot longer than a year, to start addressing it and looking at it.
That's right. It's coming up on my dad's birthday in next week. And I broke down yesterday in the car, and it's been over 7 years. So it's something that you love big, you're going to grieve big. He left a big hole in my life and my heart. And there's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't think about him, So yeah, we grieve differently. And that's something that people need to understand as well. So I hid my pieces and put on this fake smile, and I would nod my head and tell everybody that I'm fine. But I was dying inside. If you looked through my eyes, I looked completely dead. And I can pick up when I come in contact with somebody, I can pick up immediately if they're going through depression based on how they have a very dull look in their eyes. And I haven't been wrong since. Or so far, but I would hide my pieces. And how this whole music thing started, I never thought I would do it professionally or as a ministry. I was looking at my boys one day, and I had smiled for years and felt nothing. And I had this thought run through my head that you can't die looking back at what you've lost. You have to live for what you have left, and my 2 boys is what I have left. And I remember smiling for the first time that day and feeling that joy again that I haven't experienced in so many years. And I told God that day, I said, so many people don't make it through things. They never get to the point. They get stuck in some kind of emotion, or they get stuck in a stage, and they don't feel this joy. And I want people to feel that. And I'll go wherever you want me to go and do whatever you want me to do to help bring a little bit of hope and sunshine and help to anybody that needs my help. So that's how the whole music thing started.
Yeah, I think your dad would be so proud of you, of the path that you're on and the direction you've taken, your life with everything that's happened, I'm sure he's smiling down on you.
I know he is. Our first album that we created was called I Made It Through, and it was the beginning. If you put them in a certain order, it's the beginning of a trial to making it through. And I thought that was my mission. We hit the road with that album and did some really cool things. And God started to deal with me that making it through wasn't really the true message, that rising above that was the true message. And I thought, what does that mean? What does rising above mean? Making it through should be the final journey, right? But then I started to realize that so many times people do make it through, and they say, thank God I made it through until next time. And they never do anything with what they learned. They just wait until the next trial comes. And it's such a waste because I think we were truly made, in my opinion, to make it through things and to help others along the same route. I think that's the difference between making it through and truly rising above it and soaring. And I think when you rise above it is when you really get your healing. So that's my mission now, is to try to still help people to make it through, but try to encourage them to turn back and look at other people along their way. And they can connect immediately with them through empathy, not sympathy, but through empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And people know that they've gone down that route and that they've survived, and they're a living testimony that they've survived. So that's been our mission since, in the whole creation of our new album called We Will Rise that came out a couple months ago.
Well, and this is what I started to talk about at the beginning of the show, is that I understand that you're donating proceeds from this second album, We Will Rise.
Yes. I live in Dallas, Texas, and we weren't affected by Hurricane Harvey. But we're just 4 hours away from the people who are, and our state has been devastated. Unless you've gone down there and seen it, you wouldn't believe the amount of rebuilding that has to be done. It's gonna take the next few years, if not the next decade.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty hopeless situation. And we have family that lives in the Beaumont area. My husband has a cousin that lost her home in Houston. The relatives in Beaumont didn't lose their homes, but they were out in the midst of the recovery and the rescue missions trying to help. They recovered or rescued 400 animals that were left behind because the rescue boats didn't have enough time, not enough time and not enough space for the animals. They just had enough space for the humans. And so they went and rescued them, and then made human rescues as well. So we went down there and helped with bringing them supplies, that whole community supplies from Dallas. And it really puts into perspective how much people have lost and how much I still have. Mm-hmm. And my manager called the week that Hurricane Harvey had hit Texas, and he said, I'm seeing these pictures in this video, and it's heartbreaking of what's going on down there. And he said, I just hear We Will Rise. That's all I hear in my head. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, it's an anthem for anyone who, has gone through something big, has gone through the fire, has felt like they're dead, and felt like that there's no hope. But it's an action and an anthem to rise out of that circumstance. And I said, this is an anthem for such a time as this. And I said, we need to put our money where our mouth is, and we need to not only help financially, but if we can do it in a way that we can spread an anthem of hope and restoration in the process, then that's what we need to do. So we decided to donate 100% of the proceeds from now into the end of the year, which is where most of my record sales probably are going to be since the record just launched. And we also have created a T-shirt called Texas Strong, and then has We Will Rise on it. And 100% of those proceeds will go to the hurricane. Now we have 2 more hurricanes that came behind Harvey that have been devastating in their own right. So we're going to be splitting up that between Harvey, Irma in Florida, and Maria for the Caribbean.
Yeah. I couldn't think of a better time for your album to come out. And I've been listening to your song, We Will Rise, as well. And it's very heartfelt. I can see where that will help give people courage and hope, as they're going through whatever difficult times they're going through. And I just applaud you for, taking such a personal step in making sure that that you're donating the proceeds to help with these 3 hurricanes, people that have been affected and victims of this. It's heartbreaking,
Yeah, it is. And, a lot of money has been raised for Harvey. And, I know some people are probably sitting back thinking, well, they're fine. They've had millions raised from different directions. But when you see the enormous amount of devastation.
Yeah.
There's not even a amount of money, in my opinion, at this point that can even be raised. I don't even think they're going to have enough. It's 80% of the homes did not have flood insurance, so you have 80% of the victims just in Houston alone that has lost everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we look at Florida with Irma, and then with Maria, I mean, we're looking in some areas just complete devastation. You know, this thing's gone, completely gone.
The prayers definitely need to go to Puerto Rico at this time because they're saying they don't even know if they're going to have electricity for the next 6 months. They were already in pretty bad shape, not only money-wise, but for a country, money-wise, and, from the last hurricane that came up through there. So this just toppled it over.
Yeah. Well, and so let's talk a little bit more about your album. I think it's so great that you're doing the donations that you're doing. You know, the inspiration behind your album was really kind of taking it to the next level. Why don't you talk to us a little bit more about your song We Will Rise and some of the other songs that are on the album?
We Will Rise was written, so Ed Cash, you probably don't know his name, but his songs you do know. He's written anthem worship songs like How Great Is Our God and Whom Shall We Fear, and just about anything you like in CCM genre of music he's written. And we had an opportunity to meet with him about this new album. And as I'm telling him my story, how I came up with the We Will Rise, my very first concert was actually on my dad's birthday, which was very awesome in a way, and was with Michael W. Smith. So that's unusual for the very first concert. My story is completely backwards. And we'd worked so hard that we didn't have anything else. And that night I prayed and I said, God, I don't even know where to go from here. You know, we just had that one concert. And 3 days later, a lady that I went to church with emailed me, and she said, I had this dream, and I don't know what it means. But she said, it just said, I made it through. It's not the true message, that rising above is the true message, and I'll take you there on wings. And I called her, and I said, do you know that I have a CD called I Made It Through? And she said, I had no idea. So I just figured that was the answer to my prayer that night, and I held on to that for 3 years. I said, if we do another album, it has to be around the topic of rising above. So we go in and we sit down with Ed, and I'm telling him that story, and he starts playing We Will Rise. And I started crying. It was perfect. I'm not a typical musician because I'm very analytical. We run our own businesses, and I'm a CEO type, and I go in with a word chart, which he thought was very funny. That's not typical. So I had rising above in the middle, and each song had a topic that revolved around the rising above that kind of taught someone how to rise above. And I said, but I don't have this core song. And within minutes we had it, and I ended up co-writing with him on the rest of the song. So as songwriters, we can rhyme and try to make the line perfect. But there's something about a song that you get inspiration like that. I always say that I feel like God breathed into it. It's just a different feeling that you have. And so that song is very special to me for that reason. There's other songs on the album that are special in their own right. I Am Loved is a new single that went to radio this year, and it's doing very well. And it's just a song that pretty much talks about watching your speech, how one kind word can change the way that you feel and think. And we have to say things like, I am loved and I'm a child of the King. So that's a song that equips our speech. Then we have a song on there that it was the very first song that my husband was involved in the songwriting. He had a dream, and he'd had it for 4 nights in a row. And when he told me what it was about, I said, that's exactly how I felt in the midst of my depression, how I hid pieces from everyone but God saw them. And so we wrote the song No One But You, because when no one else knows what you're going through, God still knows. He still knows. Then we have a song on there called Wings. And
well, before you get to Wings real quick, I think it's so important when people hear, just like when you went through depression and how the only person that knew was really God. It really kind of brings to the point that a lot of times when people are going through depression, they're feeling like they're so alone. They could be around a group of people and feel so alone. And so I think your song really helps people to understand that, no, they're not alone. They're not walking through this. God's walking with them, number one. But on top of that, that if they look up, there's other people there that are willing to help them and be with them and kind of walk their journey with them. They're just truly not alone.
Yeah, and my mindset, one thing that really caused me to take my pieces and hide them. My husband and kids knew that I was dealing with it. They just didn't know how to help me. I just would push them away. But everyone else, we live in a society that is so fast-paced, and so we're in our own little self-absorbed bubbles. We've got our own schedule, and we're 90 miles an hour to get there. And that's my life, too. I'm not judging anybody. But sometimes we can't see past our own circumstance or our own timeline in order to see someone else's hurt. And, people, they'd say, how you doing? And I'd say, I'm not doing well today. And you would see it. Sometimes people would even huff. Like, why did I ask her that? Because I don't have time to listen. I expected her to say she was fine. And so a couple times of getting that, I just decided, you know what? Nobody cares. I'm just going to hide.
Yeah.
And I made myself feel like I was alone because of that.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful. We never know what people are going through.
Yeah, and if you're going to ask the question, really be there present and listen to what someone's saying, because maybe they just need that. I hear you, or I understand your pain. I'm going through, pain too, or whatever the case is. Even just a hug. Sometimes hugs work best.
That's it. I think the best thing that anybody could have ever done for me would be to hug me and say, you know what, you're going to make it. It's going to be okay, and just hug me. That's the best thing they could have done in that instance, instead of giving me advice, because a lot of times the advice was wrong. They meant well. They had hearts.
And so it's good to hear what you would have wanted to hear, because people listening, if they know someone that's going through a tough time, maybe a hug, and just, you're going to get through this. It's going to work out.
Yeah. They just need to know somebody cares. So I don't know. If you go ahead.
I know you were talking about Wings, and I'd love to hear about that one, because we do have some time for that. I would hate to not hear about that one.
Yeah. I know. I've got several on there. Wings just pretty much talks about all the things that's happened in life. This wasn't necessarily about my dad. We had a rough start whenever we got married, and the beginning of our life together, me and my husband. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing, because it was those wins and those adversaries and those problems that made us strong and has molded our character to where is who we are today. So don't regret your past. If you've got a bad past, or if you've messed up somewhere along the way, it's made you stronger today. So that's kind of what Wings is about. Do you have time to hear about any of the others?
Oh yes, please do. This is your time, and I'm so glad that we get to spend it talking about your new album.
I appreciate it. Legacy is a song that I'm very, very happy about, because my dad, the year he died, he wrote a Sunday school lesson about the dash, and it was about that old poem that pretty much says it's not your birth date on your tombstone or your death date on your tombstone. It's the little dash in between that represents your whole life, but it's the smallest part of a tombstone. And so he did a Sunday school lesson and taught people, this is how I've lived my life. What does God want to see in your life? And what can you pass down and leave to be remembered by? And so we created his tombstone. It's the entire length of his tombstone. It's done in bronze, and it's his lesson. It's his words. This is what the dash is. This is what God wants to see in your dash. And my dash was 58 years long when I passed, and I am surrounded by the pictures that represent my dash, my life. And so I brought those words of that tombstone to Ed, and I said, I don't want to get caught up in the trademarking of the dash or anything like that, but I want to write a song. My dad lived with unconditional love. That's how he treated us. And he gave more and didn't expect anything in return. And that is the type of legacy that I want to pass down to my kids. I want to be remembered just like that. And so we wrote a song called Legacy, and it pretty much depicts the words that I just said. And so I'm very proud of that. That was in honor of my dad.
That is, you're just everything about your album and, your messaging and what it is that you're doing for the community is so heartfelt and offers so much hope. It's such an honor to spend this time with you and talk with you, Natasha. It really is. My goodness. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community? Of course, buy We Will Rise. Everyone needs to, support these efforts and, of course, get this amazing album.
They can go to my website, which is natashaowensmusic.com. And that is where you find the physical CD. That's where you find the T-shirt. But if you want a digital download, you can download that from iTunes. We're giving 100% of the money from the digital side as well to the effort. So a lot of people don't like the physical CDs these days. I do. I like to have one in my hand. But I
actually don't. I like getting the downloads.
Well, I do both. I listen to the downloads on my phone, but I love when I go to a concert, I love getting the CD because I love pulling out and seeing the pictures and reading the words of the songs and all of that. I'm just old school when it comes to that. But for listening to music, it's strictly downloaded on my phone for sure. They can go there. And I also want to say, I have Instagram and I have all these things that someone else takes care of them for me. They do the Instagram and the I don't know, somebody asked me, some little girl asked me last week if I had Snapchat, and I'm like, oh, that's another one. Add that to the list. But I have a social media girl that does all the other stuff. I do my Facebook because I'm old school and it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. But I say all of that to say this. At the end of each concert, I am not one that wants to get up on a stage and sing and walk off and that's it. I'm about ministry and I make myself available after each concert because I want to help. That's where my heart is. So I tell people I don't want my ministry to stop at the platform. They can always get me through my Facebook Messenger. They can send me a message if they just need someone someone to pray with them, someone to listen to them. I want to be there for them. And so, and I do more ministry off the platform than I do on. So, I just want to tell somebody, that's listening today, maybe if you're going through something and you just need something. You just don't know at this point. You just need something. Go to Facebook, which is Natasha Owens Music, and send me a message, and that gets straight to me.
Oh. Well, you are definitely an inspiration, Natasha, and thank you so much for taking your time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. I appreciate it.
We are going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1-2-3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Ben Wexler is a gifted leadership development and strategy consultant for professionals who want to transform their organizations and careers. Through a uniquely personalized set of processes, participants discover their unique knowledge, how to leverage that knowledge and experience, and then put it all together with a global strategy. You're more valuable, your organization is more valuable, and the change is viral. Contact Ben at 630-881-1074. 630-881-1074.
This is Jennifer McGill. My highly anticipated new album, Unbreakable, is now available at jennifermcgill.com. Everything from power ballads to high-energy jam-out-in-your-car songs. I used my highest joys and deepest pains to create empowering songs of love, strength, healing, and restoration so that you can be unbreakable too. Get your copy of Unbreakable today from jennifermcgill.com. Because who doesn't want to be unbreakable?
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending the rest of this time today. Our next guest is Annie Hopper, and she's here today to talk to us about her new book, Wired for Healing, Remapping the Brain to Recover from Chronic and Mysterious Illnesses. So Annie is an internationally recognized expert on toxic brain injuries, limbic system dysfunction, and rehabilitation. Now, Annie's new book, Wired for Healing, sheds light on how trauma causes the brain to disorganize neural circuits and shares triumphant stories of recovery of people who have been liberated from chronic illnesses and mysterious diseases through remapping the brain. So let's welcome to the show Annie Hopper.
Oh, thank you, Marianne. It's a pleasure to be here. It is such a joy to have you here. I've been looking forward to this interview as soon as I got my hands on your book. Oh my goodness, what a powerful book this is. Thank you. Well, and so for our listeners that are new to your story, why don't we talk a little bit about what inspired you on this path of healing?
Yeah, sure. That's a really great question. And like a lot of other people, my inspiration came from my own personal experience of suffering. And it started back in 2004. I was a core belief counselor in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. And I started to experience really weird, nondescript kind of vague symptoms that doctors couldn't explain, like insomnia and muscle and joint pain. And I actually started to become sensitive to a lot of chemicals in my environment. And I think part of what happened is I moved into a building, and a new building to me, but it was actually a very old building that had mold in it. And my office was located right next door to the janitor's supply room, where they held all the chemical cleaning agents for the entire building. Yeah, and so I was had a slow exposure to those chemicals over, I guess, a period of about 5 months. And I just increasingly started to get more sick, and my sense of smell increased. I didn't recognize that was happening at the time, but different scented products started to take on an incredibly different quality. It almost smelled like I was being poisoned by everything in my environment. So, somebody walked by with perfume or cologne, not only would I get a headache, not only would I get a headache or something, but I could go into convulsions. So it was really affecting my life in a really big way, and I had to really start pulling back and isolating in my life because of that.
I think a lot of people go through this and don't even realize what it is that they're experiencing, because mold is so common, and then being around these types of really toxic chemicals, most people come in contact with those almost on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, you're right. I think that most people probably don't know that a lot of the chemicals in their daily cleaning products, what they're cleaning their home with, or what they're putting on their body, from their shampoo to their conditioner to their, body lotions, whatever, have a lot of toxic chemicals in them. And thankfully, we live in a day and age now where there are more healthy alternatives. So, we can decrease the amount of toxins that we're exposed to on a daily basis. And I think it's really playing havoc with our brains and bodies. And, the one thing that I forgot to mention, too, was I was in a car accident probably about a year before I started to exhibit with symptoms of what they call multiple chemical sensitivities, which is, sensitivity to scented products. And, the car accident, it wasn't a high-velocity car accident, but it did injure my neck, and I was left with a neurological shake in my neck that kind of looked like Parkinson's for a little while. And, again, no doctors could really diagnose it, and it eventually did go away. But I think it kind of set me up for, a limbic system impairment or, brain trauma that eventually expressed as all this muscle and joint pain and an increase in sensitivities and so forth.
Well, and so you kind of touched on the key word here, limbic system. And so I wanted you to just kind of expand on that a little bit of what that means to you.
Sure, yeah. The limbic system, well, it's interesting because I'll tell you how I kind of got involved or interested in the limbic system, because I knew that I must have been suffering from some kind of brain impairment, because when I was exposed to certain things, I could no longer cognitively function. I couldn't formulate sentences, I couldn't speak, and it was just really strange. I thought, this isn't any kind of allergy. This is more than an allergy. My brain's being affected. So I started to research, what was the area of the brain that was responsible for sense of smell, because I knew that there had to be something wrong with my sense of smell, because I couldn't figure it out. I thought, why could somebody else walk down the detergent aisle of the grocery store and not go into convulsions, yet that same exposure would send me into central nervous system convulsions. So I thought, okay, there's something definitely wrong. So I started to investigate the limbic system, which is the area of the brain that's responsible for sense of smell. Now, it turns out that the limbic system is located in the midbrain, and what it does, it's actually known as the feeling and reacting brain. And there's a whole bunch of structures within the brain that make up the limbic system, but basically what it does is it filters the billions of bits of sensory and emotional information that are coming at us at any given time, and it categorizes that information into two very distinct categories, threat or no threat. So you can imagine if this area of the brain is not working functionally, that it could start to categorize information that is not necessarily a threat into the threat category. And that's exactly what was happening with me. And, there are various forms of trauma that can cause impairment in the limbic system. So for me, it was a chemical trauma. It was also a physical trauma from the car accident, but it could be viral. So a lot of people have a virus and they feel like it never goes away, and that can activate those sensors in the brain. Also, bacterial infection or psychological stress or emotional stress. So it could be a combination of all of those things that can cause the limbic system to start firing irregularly. So what happens is the threat centers of the brain fire too often and too rapidly, and it almost like it sends your brain and body into this constant fight or flight state.
Oh my goodness. And so you're just in this state constantly where your adrenaline's kicked up, it probably feels like you've had one too many energy drinks, and it doesn't give you've got to get to a period where your system just gets exhausted.
Yeah, absolutely. It starts to affect so many different systems of your body, because you can imagine if you're in chronic flight or flight, what I say, it's kind of like, you can imagine if you're running away from a tiger, you would be in that fight or flight state. So when you're running away from a tiger, it's not important to communicate. So you don't text your friends and say, hey, I'm running from a tiger. You don't phone anyone to tell them what's going on. You just run, because that's what's important at that time. So cell-to-cell communication starts to be affected when you're in fight or flight. Also, when you're running away from a tiger, it's not important to eat. It's not important to digest your food or to eliminate. So, we see things like absorption of food starts to become affected, or digestive issues start to happen, or people have detoxification problems. It also affects our immune system, or our ability to fight disease, because again, if you're running away from a tiger, it's not important to fight a disease in that moment. It's just important to run. So, when you're in that chronic fight or flight state, it really affects so many different systems of the body. And, it makes sense that that's what, we're seeing people with so many different expressions of this disorder, and nobody's really looking at the kernel or the root cause, which is that it's affected those mechanisms in the brain that have catapulted people into this fight or flight response.
When you came to this realization that it's the limbic system that is responsible for all these things, did you kind of come to this point where you were just going, gosh, it's like finding a gold in a mine. Here you have this gem of information that it's not really being used or accessed in other ways. I mean, you hear about some things, and you're so right when they talk about fight or flight, then they're saying, well, you need to eliminate coffee or don't do these things, but they don't get to the root cause of what's causing that.
Yeah, and I think that, it's interesting because, I think neuroplasticity is a really interesting term. People throw it around a lot. You hear about it a lot. But neuroplasticity simply means the brain is capable of change, right? So what's happened in these cases is that the brain has been changed for the worse. The brain has been changed through trauma and stuck in this fight or flight mechanism. So, now we're just discovering what the brain is capable of, and really looking at ways that we can self-direct neuroplastic changes within the brain. And that's what we really focus on in the program that I've developed is, how do we create the changes that are necessary in the brain to shut off that chronic fight or flight response and get back into that state of growth and repair. And, I just want to back up for a second and say that, it's an unconscious response. People don't know that this is happening, and they don't, it's like, it's kind of like, it's kind of like if you break your arm, there's nothing that you did, or nothing that you thought or said or did that created that. You have a broken arm, you just have to have the proper rehabilitation process for healing your arm. So in this way, it's kind of similar. There's something going on in the brain, and we need to actually address what's going on in the brain so that the brain can send appropriate messages now to the rest of the body so that the body can heal as well.
It amazes me with all the technology and information that we have on different parts of the body that the brain seems somewhat still of a mystery in some ways. There's some things that they still haven't really figured out, even though science is getting better with that, as far as moving forward. And I got to tell you, I loved your book, Wired for Healing. I loved reading the stories that were in the book, because it touches on everything from environmental toxins, chemical exposures, just like people going through just all these things, and maybe they don't even know what's going on. They just know that something's not right.
Yeah, I've taken. I wrote about people that were really desperate for help, right, and suffering to large degrees. And, what's really interesting from my perspective it's just so amazing to witness people go from being disabled or really, really largely affected by these illnesses to being completely recovered people that are now participating in life and have energy and, don't have to deal with these illnesses anymore. And it almost seems, people say, well, it almost seems too good to be true. But then when they read the science behind it, what everyone always says is, this just makes sense. It makes sense. And I think that, understanding the brain on its own terms and understanding that the brain is an organ, just like every other organ in our body, it has a specific job, and its job is to look for patterns. And when we recognize that the brain has been injured or altered somehow, and that the patterns that it's actually creating are not healthy anymore and sending alarm messages to the body, and we can correct those messages, then things like medical miracles can happen. And it's not a miracle. It's just about, really rewiring the brain and again, moving from that state of survival into a state of growth and repair.
It's so exciting, to see that there's that kind of information available. And I understand that you have medical studies that are taking place at this moment in regards to this.
Yeah, there are 2 medical studies, independent studies happening right now. One is at the McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario. It's an observational study. And the other one is happening at the University of Calgary in Alberta, Canada, where we'll be looking at changes in brain function with neural retraining and with patients who suffer from chemical sensitivities, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. That's a mouthful.
That is. And if you have it, you're like, goodness gracious,
Yeah, it's known as POTS. The short form is POTS. Yeah. But, it's interesting. We there are natural ways that we can rewire the brain. And what we teach our clients is to really learn about limbic system impairment. Like, what does the limbic system do in a healthy brain? And then how do you recognize when it's not working functionally? And there's a self-assessment questionnaire that we actually have on our website at retrainingthebrain.com, so people can actually see what are some of the symptoms of limbic system impairment.
Yeah, and I saw that, and I took it, too.
Oh, did you?
Yes, I did. I was like, let me go through this. And it's really interesting because it's asking these questions that are kind of getting you to the point where it's like, okay, well, it makes it really simple to see what's going on there,
Oh, good. I'm glad that you took that assessment for yourself. And then the other part is, to become aware of patterns that are associated with limbic system impairment. And so it affects us on many different levels. I mean, most people come to the program because they have physical symptoms, but it's also affecting us, when your brain isn't working functionally, a lot of things go wrong. So it's going to affect us physically, but also it'll affect us psychologically. So we'll notice that our thought patterns are concerned with we're catastrophizing, or we're thinking the worst, or we're constantly kind of thinking about our state of health. It can affect us emotionally and behaviorally as well. So emotionally, common emotions that are associated with limbic system impairment are anxiety and fear and worry. And it makes us behave in self-protective ways too. So, we know that and this, again, isn't people's fault, but we know that thinking and feeling actually can act back on the brain and change the structure and function of the brain. And one really good example of that is Leonardo DiCaprio's role in The Aviator, where he was portraying Howard Hughes, who had really bad OCD. And Leonardo worked with Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz when he was studying for the role. Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz is like the guru of OCD. So he taught Leonardo what Howard Hughes would think, how he would feel, and how he would behave. And Leonardo did such a fantastic job at character acting in that role that he actually developed OCD. So he structurally changed his brain just through character acting. And it's rumored that he had to work with Howard Hughes for up to a year after the movie to undo what he had done to his brain through character acting. So we know that how we think and how we feel and how we behave actually has an impact on the structural neural circuits in the brain. So we teach people how they can think, act, and behave differently to get the brain out of that pattern. So we also teach them tools and how to chemically change the brain as well. So we're structurally changing the brain and chemically changing the brain. And then we also teach something called incremental training, which is a type of neural shaping to help to increase or to strengthen the new neural pathways that we're creating. But I have to tell you, this is not an overnight program. It's not a quick fix. It's definitely something that people have to commit to. We ask people to practice every day for an hour for a minimum of 6 months. So it doesn't take Olympic energy, but it does take certainly a high degree of commitment to become successful at the program. But you know, I can honestly tell you that people have changed their lives, and you know, when you can change your health, an hour a day is nothing when you compare it to how much time and energy is put into trying to manage illness. So I say the effort is well worth it.
I would agree, because a lot of times, even let's say someone does have XYZ diagnoses for a condition that they're having, it really is just managing, you know, the symptoms as opposed to really getting to the root and changing how your body reacts to all that. You know, so it's absolutely. I love, like, I've gone through your website, and I, you know, just absolutely adore your book. And it's on your page of how does this program work, you have building synapses, and they're like connecting together. You can see it, and it just makes it so vivid for people who are looking at this going, well, gosh, I'm not sure I maybe know too much about the brain or any of this stuff, but your stories in here show again after again after again how it's working for people with different ailments.
Yeah, from chronic fatigue to fibromyalgia to chemical sensitivities to food sensitivities, Lyme disease, chronic pain, anxiety, electromagnetic sensitivities. It just goes on and on and on. And and it really, you know, I'm not surprised. At the end of the day, I'm not surprised, because if there is a maladaptive stress response involved in any of those illnesses, which it is, then it makes sense that rewiring the brain and getting out of that chronic fight or flight response would help in the recovery process. And, you know, it's interesting, because I know when I was sick, I went to a lot of different doctors, a lot of different specialists, both in the mainstream medical and alternative healthcare. And, you know, in alternative healthcare circles, you know, chemical sensitivities is known as a toxic overload syndrome. They give you this barrel analogy that your body is a barrel and it can only handle so many toxins, and then when you exceed that level, you start to exhibit as symptoms of illness. So I did every treatment that they recommended, and yet, you know, I detoxed to the moon and back 10,000 times. And if that theory was true completely, then I could have been well. But what happened is I progressively still got worse. So it didn't make any sense to me that it was just about toxic overload. I think that toxic overload could help to initiate the brain injury for sure, but I don't think that just detoxification in itself is going to help once the brain has been affected as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up. That was actually one of the questions I have here, because, you know, it's interesting. I've done detoxes and actually felt way worse during them and after. And I know in your book you talk about how sometimes it can be a little too intense.
Yeah, exactly, because, you know, you can imagine this goes back to the cellular capacity in a brain that's stuck in a brain and body stuck in fight or flight, because your cells aren't working as functionally anymore. You know, you can't absorb nutrients, you can't excrete waste products, right? So when you start to cleanse or do any kind of detoxification treatment and you're stuck in fight or flight, sometimes it's an uphill battle because your cells are in shutdown. So you're introducing a lot of toxins into your system that may not have a correct exit pathway.
Yeah, it just is kind of putting things, you know, I think it's actually causing more problems than helping in some ways. At least it feels like it, you know?
Yeah, certainly for some people that is true. You know, I think maybe if you're operating with a healthy brain, then or a healthy system, then detoxification can help for some people. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's been my experience too that unfortunately a lot of people get worse. Mm-hmm.
Doing that. Now, I was real impressed to hear that your coaches that you have with your program have all gone through this, have all had ailments themselves and come out the other end.
Yeah, I think that's I think it's a really important aspect of the program because, you know, I think when I teach the program, this is what I hear from people. They were like, you know, if this is coming from somebody else, I might not believe it, but you've lived it. You've lived it, and you've come through the other side. And I say, yes, I have, and you can too. And every person that works on our team, every one of our certified instructors or coaches have had limbic system impairment, have had endless diagnoses because of that, various different illnesses, and they've all recovered through the program. So they know, not only do they know the science, they know the program inside out, front to back, and back again. You know, they know exactly what you need to do to rewire the limbic system and that path, like how disabling it can be. You know, when I think of some of our staff, Christine's son, Riley, had Lyme disease, and he was paralyzed for 3 years and couldn't walk, couldn't talk, couldn't eat. So Riley eventually, he recovered some through an alternative doctor in the States, but then he was still left with a whole bunch of leftover symptoms. He came to the program, and now he's fully recovered and going to university. And Christine recognized that, you know, as a mom taking care of a really sick child, that she was in limbic system impairment too. And when she looked back at her history, she thought, you know, this started a long time ago with food sensitivities when I was in university. And then, you know, various skin problems and rashes, and then the anxiety of having a really sick child. So she was thrown into limbic system trauma as well. So, you know, she's recovered from that. In fact, her son has, her sister has, and, you know, Michelle, one of our other instructors, she had electromagnetic or electric hypersensitivity syndrome. And she's fully recovered from that too. So yeah, I mean, every one of them has had like just this amazing story of recovery.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I was earlier I was emailing your book information and your website to a couple different friends that I have that have gone through just years and years and years of doctors not knowing what's going on with them. And, you know, it's kind of like, well, you could have this, and they do all the tests, and they just can't put their finger on what's happening. And I was just so impressed with how the work that you do, it helps people with everything. And I understand it also helps with inflammation and pain.
Yes, it does. It helps with inflammation and pain as well. And, yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, again, going back to, you know, if the kernel is a limbic system trauma, and it's affecting the limbic system and the way that our brain and body interpret information and categorize information, and it's sending those alarm messages to all systems of the body. You can see how things like chronic inflammation and pain would be a part of that. Pain is processed in the limbic system. So, you know, the messages, it's interesting because, of course, when you have an injury, you want to deal with the acute injury, but after time, if it's not resolving, it could just be an issue in the brain at that point. And, yeah, I've watched lots of people recover from chronic pain. It's funny, actually. They come in not being able to, actually, there was a woman in the last program, I didn't know that she wasn't able to move her arm above her head for years. And she came in about on the 4th day, and she could move her arm, and she said, I cannot believe this.
It's got to be, you must have the best seat in the house to be able to watch all these personal miracles take place again and again and again.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. You know, I'm thrilled that I get to watch that. And, you know, at the same time, I'm so frustrated. I'm frustrated with the medical system. You know, I'm like, really? But I think that things are changing because, you know, I was invited to speak at the Institute for Functional Medicine in June in Los Angeles. And there were a room full of 400 doctors that were eager and excited to hear what I had to say. And, even, a lot of them came up to me afterwards and said, I understand now what's going on with my patients. And I said, yes, absolutely. So, it's not that things aren't happening in the body, because when you have all these tests done, of course it's going to come back that something's not right. You're going to have too many heavy metals in your system. Maybe your blood work is going to show all kinds of things, but that doesn't mean that can't be reversed, or that through rewiring limbic system functions that will change all of those results. So I really hope that your friends that you sent the book to the website to really understand that. And that's what's different about our program too, is that we don't chase symptoms. We don't chase symptoms at all, actually. Yeah. Our focus is strictly about rewiring the brain and how to do that.
Well, I had already received an email from one of my friends, and it says, OMG, wow. Yeah, it is OMG, wow. And I want to go back to that, having the front seat and watching these people recover. Recovery isn't a linear process, right? It's not like people are going to be recovered in 5 days. Again, it takes, they can start to see changes in 5 days. That's not unusual, actually, when people come to the in-person program, the intensive that we teach. But it really is a commitment to 6 months, because there is an ebb and flow to recovery. Not every day is going to be a stellar day. There are going to be days that are going to be hard. And if you continue to work the practice and you continue to train your brain in a very specific way, your brain has no choice but to make those changes. Okay, and you got so many exciting things happening. So where do you go from here?
Well, Marianne, that's a really great question. I mean, I really see this being a global problem, and we're representing a global solution for people. So, we have certified coaches in various different countries throughout North America now, and one in Ireland and one in Spain, and we're training people in Finland. So, we're really hopeful that we can get to the people who not only need the information but also need the help. And, on that line, we would also, one of our visions is to educate the medical system. How can we get into the medical system to start teaching doctors as they're being trained to become physicians, how to recognize limbic system impairment, how to diagnose it, and then how to refer for appropriate treatment. Because I think in the long run, if people were diagnosed appropriately early on, then that would really save years of needless suffering and, of course, a lot of hardship and a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it saves on the insurance end, with insurance not having to pay out so much money for people who are having different ailments. And, of course, the massive toll on the person themselves having to go through this experience. It just saves on all fronts there.
Yeah, and relationships, too, because, oftentimes, as you can probably guess, when one member of the family is sick, that affects everyone in the family. So, I mean, it just saves so much suffering for so many people. And, that means that everyone gets to live their lives as they're meant to, not to be focused on that one individual in the family who's just chronically dealing with illness all the time. So, it's a gift for everyone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed watching all the videos that you have that talk about just the stories and experiences that people following this program have. It's just like miraculous what they've been going through, how things have just turned around for them. And I've loved every single one of them. And we talked earlier about how I've sent this over to my friends, and they're like, oh my, OMG, wow. So I know that they're checking into all the great things that you offer. And it's funny because I was talking with one of my girlfriends earlier, and she was saying, I went through that self-check, the check thing that you have, that little checklist on your website, and she was able to check pretty much every single one of those things off as, I have this.
This is what's going on. And her doctors haven't been able to figure out what's happening with her. So I was telling her, you need to sign up for the workshop and buy the book. You know? So I'm sure you'll see her.
Yes, yeah. Well, on that note, there are different ways that you can access the program, right? Definitely buy the book. Wired for Healing is a really good starter, and it gives the science behind the program, and of course my own personal story and discovery of neuroplasticity and how to really change the limbic system. But it doesn't really have the how-to, because the how-to is really experiential. And if you want an experiential experience, there are two different ways to do that. We have a 14-hour instructional DVD that's been translated into, I think, 8 different languages. And but of course, the gold standard is always coming to the in-person program. It's a really 5-day intensive, what we call neuroplasticity boot camp, where you have a one-on-one interaction with instructors in a very small environment, like 20 or 30 people. So we keep it really intimate and really immersive. Yeah. So. Yeah, there are many different ways to get the information. It just really depends on, I guess, your ability and your choice at that time,
and where you're at. Well, and Annie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Oh, thank you, Marianne. It was my pleasure.
Oh, and real quick, gosh, I can't even believe I almost forgot that. That'd just be silly. Why would I talk about all this great stuff and not let people know where they can find you? So, where can our listeners connect with you, be part of your community, and for those that are looking to get those mystery illnesses and chronic illnesses kind of, done with, where they can go and get more information?
Sure. Our website is retrainingthebrain.com. Again, retrainingthebrain.com. So really easy to remember. All of the information about our programs, about our team, about the products that we offer, about how to access the program, where to buy the book, all of it is on the website.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you, Annie. We just appreciate your time, and my goodness, what an inspiration you are. And anytime you have anything new that comes up, we want to hear about it.
Oh, thanks, Marianne, for sure.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.